Welcome to the Cornerstone Church podcast. Great to have you tuning in for another week. We are carrying on. We're still in the Pilgrim's Progress, and we're in the penultimate chapter, really. So over the next couple of weeks, we're thinking that we're going to come to the end of the journey. So we're right there now, and we're walking along with Christian and Hopeful as they encounter some of their last challenges before they get to rest forever with the Lord. Last time we had an episode that focused quite a lot on Ignorance, this character Ignorance, and their conversation with him, and he resurfaces in this chapter as well. But before that, there's a couple of other characters to meet, and so I'm here again with Pete and Rory.
Hello.
And all the previous episodes you can catch up with on our podcast channel. And so they go on. So Christian and Hopeful, and this is where we pick up the story. They go on, and Ignorance is following behind. And just as they were thinking about the way and what they were going to do, they meet a man, and it says, "Behold, a dark-looking man covered with a very light robe." And
well, it actually says in the actual original, it's a man of black flesh covered in a very light robe. I mean, I think it is worth just talking about this, because I think this is where, in our age, we cancel him because he's a racist. But that isn't going on in his mind, I don't think. I think we'll see as we discuss that this black man is not really a black man. He's coming as an angel of light. And so what he's doing is he's showing the difference between light and darkness. That's what he's trying to show. And that this man is a flatterer and a liar. So he presents himself as one thing, but he's another thing. And that's the big issue here. It's not really his black skin. And it would be utterly shameful for us in our day and age to say, oh, Bunyan's a racist, I'm not going to read anything about it. Because that would just be not true, I don't think.
No, and all the way throughout this book, the physical has been teaching spiritual lessons, and that's what's going on here. It's the contrast between the light outer, which promises guidance and truth and revelation, and the black inner, which is to do with darkness and confusion and lies. So it has nothing to do with colour of skin or anything like that. As you say, it's the contrast between light and what it stands for, and dark and what it stands for is the thing here. And so anyway, this man approaches, and as you said, he's called the Flatterer. And the Flatterer asks them, Christian and Hopeful, why are you standing there? And they say, we're going to the celestial city, but we don't know which of these ways to take. And Flatterer's response is, well, you should follow me, because that's where I'm going. Yeah. And so in some ways, at this stage of the journey, it's quite surprising that they then just do that. They don't really ask any
they have come to,
or
they've not come to a crossroads, but they come to a place
where there
are two roads, and they're both as straight as each other, as far as they can perceive.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, their mistake was not, as I guess as we'll see, it was not following what the shepherds had said. They'd been given this information to be able to work out which one to go on. And they forgot that and didn't bother about that. And a Flatterer had obviously come along with his flattery and his outward "I am an angel of light" stuff to take them down the wrong road.
Yes, yeah. And they are culpable for what happens next, though, because what happens is they begin to follow the Flatterer. And after time, the road that they are taking begins to slowly turn its back on the celestial city. And Bunyan says that their own faces by degrees were turning more and more with every step away from the celestial city until their backs are to it. And then Bunyan says, yet they follow him.
Yes.
And so they continued, even though they could see that they were no longer orientated in the right direction. And then, of course, it goes very wrong, doesn't it?
But that's what flattery does, doesn't it? It possesses you. It talks about you. It it turns your face to look inwardly and think about yourself. You're a good person. You're a nice person. You're you're not that bad. And as you follow that, you turn away from the truth. And it is amazing what a bit of flattery does. And the Proverbs warn us about people with lying tongues, don't they? And forked tongues and things like that, like a snake. And that's exactly what the snake did in the garden with Eve. There's flattery, there's sort of encouragements. You too could be like God. You will see things you've never seen before. Just look at that. Before you know it, you're taken up with yourself and what you're going to get out of stuff and all of that. That's what flattery does.
And the error seems to have started by not looking at the word. So the instruction that they were given by the shepherds, they had and they could have followed, but they've already started to go away from the word and trust in themselves. And then when the flatterer comes, he can easily deceive because they've already taken their eyes off who's important.
Well, that is like Eve, isn't it?
Yeah.
Eve should have said, "Talk to Adam," because this is the rules. These are the laws that we've got. Yeah.
And so they end up inside a net. I guess it's like, those old-fashioned forest traps. If you wanted to catch a rabbit or a small deer or something, you put a little bit of bait in the middle and there's a trap, a net, and as they step on it, it whips them up into the branches. It's that kind of thing. And anyway, they're caught and they start weeping and they are chastising themselves because they should have listened, as you've been saying, to the instructions that they had. But then, as they lay bewailing themselves in the net, they espy this shining one coming towards them with a whip of small cords in his hand. And so
it sounds pretty scary, doesn't it?
Yeah, you kind of know what's coming here. And then this shining one basically interrogates them and is wanting to find out how they've ended up in this net when they were supposed to be on the right road. And the Shining One says to them, where did you lie last night? And they said, well, we were with the shepherds in the Delectable Mountains. Yeah. Okay, did the shepherds give you a notes on how to navigate these paths? Well, yeah, they did. Did you, when you were confused, get out that note and read it? No. Why? We forgot. Did the shepherds at least warn you to beware of flatterers? Yes, but we did not imagine that such a fine-spoken man could be him. And so, he basically, and this is part of, proper discipline, isn't it? He's trying to go back over their error with them. There would be no use just coming straight with the whip. He wants to sort of teach them where they went wrong in their thinking. Did you have a lack in resources? No. Did you not have what you needed? No. So he wants to show them where they've gone wrong. Which is very helpful, isn't it?
He cuts them out of the net first and then shows them that, doesn't he? So I think that's absolutely right. So he's a good one, isn't he? He's not a trapper or a deceiver or a flatterer. He's certainly not a flatterer because he's speaking truth to them that's going to hurt them, isn't it? So, I think the interesting thing about the flatterer is that he. I've forgotten what I was going to say, actually. So over to you.
Well, no, I mean, only that he. Only that then this Shining One really gets down to the business of disciplining them. So he then takes the whip to them and chastised them sore. It says there. But again, this is done out of love. So it says, as many as I love, I rebuke. And so this is part of the Lord's goodness to them. Is not just to put them back on the right road and pretend nothing happens, but to teach them their error, and to even sort of withdraw a bit of His goodness and blessing from them, so that they might repent and seek the good things that they did enjoy. I mean,
that's what I was going to say. So you would think, wouldn't you, when we read this? I think we said it when we reread it together, that these seasoned followers of Christ would have picked up the flatterer quite quickly. But this is life, isn't it? we think we know, we think we understand flatterers, but they that's the point of them. They come with truth, don't they? They come with sort of they are an angel of light. They're telling us things that sound right. And I think we can easily fall for that. That's why we need to be fundamentally looking at the scriptures and really listening sometimes to new people that we hear. What are they saying? What are they actually really saying? And we'll get that in some of the conversations with ignorance in a minute. They really take ignorance apart, don't they, in a minute? But they should have done that with Flatterer, really. Yeah. But it's just amazing that he spoke so well.
Yeah, and flattery appeals to our flesh. That's the problem with it, is that it strokes and massages as our ego.
Yeah.
And therefore it makes you do things which, in principle you might be against and feel in your conscience that it would be wrong for you to do. But if somebody says, you'd be brilliant at this, mate. I can't think of anyone better. I love you. I love you. You'd be, we wouldn't trust anyone else with this. Like, this is why we're coming to you, because you can hold these people together and you can do it and you'll be brilliant, And it all is so nice to hear, isn't it? Because, the idea that people might be thinking well of us and believe in us and think we can do something is great. And so you can trample over quite a lot of conscience, if you get some news like that in the ear, can't you? And that's the danger of it. And I think what they're trying to say is part of having a sober mind is you might sort of hear that, but you're looking through that and saying, no, come on, what is this right to do or not?
But other people that they meet, they I think nearly always, and we've noticed this before, ask the question, where are you from? How did you start the journey?
Yeah.
They don't do that with Flatterer. They don't ask those basic questions to make sure that he's a sound mind. They just believe him. Yeah.
The times that, they often go... They do when they get caught, it's because they're not usually switched on,
asking those questions, which they did of ignorance. Yep.
So that's
he beats them.
He beats them, and they're on their way, and they're thanking him for his kindness in beating them.
And do they sing a song? I think they sing a song or something.
They do, they do, and to kind of go over that what's happened, and then they move on to and they see another person coming softly and all alone along the highway, and Christian says
coming the other way though, coming towards them.
That's right, coming towards them. And Christian says to his fellow, "Look, here is a man with his back towards heaven, and he is coming to meet us. I see. Let us take heed to ourselves," said Hopeful, "lest he should prove a flatterer also." So they've got recent events in the forefront of their minds, and they're now more alert, which is good. And they think, this could be it's immediately suspicious because he's going the other way. And we've just had a tough lesson taught to us, so we need to be on our guard here. And who is this that they meet?
We've got Atheist coming right up to them. He makes a beeline towards them and he asks them where they're going, to which they answer, "We're going to Mount Zion."
And he falls into a great laughter.
Yeah, howling laughter. It's quite depressing, really, if you're... Yeah.
Which is often how an atheist does. It's that belittling, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's looking down and saying, okay, and I mean that is his way, isn't it? I know more than you.
Yeah.
and in part of his argument is, I've been further than you.
Yeah.
Along this road, and I didn't see any celestial city.
Yeah.
And don't be so silly.
It's a very much it's a classic looking down on and trying to show your belief system to be absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I think that can be quite hard to deal with when someone belittles what you believe.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can think, oh well, am I stupid for going down this path?
Particularly someone like this who says he's been on the road, and he's been seeking for 20 years or whatever it was.
He's been further than they
and
have.
He's been further.
He's read more philosophy. He's done more study. He's looked at it all. He's discovered, and there's nothing there. And so he says to them,
I used to be an evangelical. It's when people say that sort of stuff, isn't
he's
it?
Deconstructed, hasn't he, or whatever the word is now. But I mean, the true thing that he says is that he understands that it's a tedious journey, and that it's full of hard slog. And he says to them, I want you to know that you will have nothing at the end of this except the pain that you have endured on this journey, which is sort of like saying, you could be much happier if you didn't go along with this Jesus stuff. You could avoid lots of unnecessary embarrassment, pain, rejection. You could be freer, happier, more normal, flowing with the river of everybody else, not trying to swim against it. It would be much easier. So firstly, this place doesn't exist, and secondly, it's just gonna give you a life that is less enjoyable and more painful than what everyone else is having. And I mean, that's behind that is the sort of the reasoning that atheism is the most enlightened, happy way of living. Which of course it isn't.
No.
So that's his argument there.
I mean, in one sense, I mean, Paul does say, doesn't he, in 1 Corinthians, that if the resurrection isn't true, if there isn't a celestial city, then we are to be most pitied. And in one sense, that is true, isn't it? Because the argument's often been given, and there is truth in it. This is the trouble, that the Christian life is the best way to live. And then if you look at a lot of studies and surveys that are done, then often Christians they have the best families. I mean, there's research done. They have the best sex. So in one sense, we do have a better life, but. Of course, and that's in the Western world, but of course there are Christians like in North Korea and other places that are suffering intensely, and then that would be absurd, wouldn't it? To if this is not true, why would I go through a concentration camp in North Korea? So he's right on that level. If there is no resurrection,
yes,
there's no hope. If the hope that you're living for is not there.
Yeah,
it's quite a sad life, isn't it? That you've lived your whole life to attain a reward, and the reward is not there. That is quite a depressing. So we are to be pitied if we're wrong.
Yes. Yeah, and then Christian says to Hopeful, "Is it true what this man is saying?"
Yeah.
Now later we discover that Christian is actually testing Hopeful because he wants to see if there's fruit and understanding in Hopeful's heart here. But Hopeful answers really quite well, and he says there are 3 things that ought to make us suspicious of this man. Firstly, we've listened to these kind of guys before, and it's never gone well for us. So we should be immediately suspicious of this. Secondly, we've just seen the gates of Mount Zion. In other words, we've had clear visions of what is to come. We've seen it with our own eyes by faith, really. And thirdly, he says, are we not to live by faith and not by sight? Which seems to sort of contradict the other point, but it doesn't really, because atheists' argument is, I've been along the road and there's nothing there. And they say, well, we're not looking for anything in this world. So we're moving to the next world. Our inheritance is to come. We're embracing a city that is coming to us. And so those are faithful.
That's a terrific line, that, isn't it? Have you got that? Because I can't... I just thought the way it was put was just terrific.
So it says, why, man, do you think we shall not be received? Christian asked. Received, exclaimed Atheist. There is not such a place as you dream of in all this world, but there is in the world to come, contended Christian.
It's a great line. That we're not here to have an easy time. Why do you think so? So Bunyan calls him, or in the mouth of one of them, I can't remember if it's Hopeful or Christian now, calls Atheist a flatterer. Interesting that he would put him under the flattering.
Well, I mean, I think he says, Hopeful says, let us take heed lest he should prove to be a flatterer also.
Okay.
So it may be...
I was sort of thinking the opposite to flattery is sort of mockery, isn't it? Because you're mocked, but if you became one of him, he would flatter you. I was wondering if it was that sort of thing. Because atheists largely mock. I mean, the new atheists, rather, today, they're just mocking, aren't they? They always mock Christians.
I mean, he is saying at the end, Hopeful says this man is one of the flatterers.
Yeah.
So he does consider him a flatterer.
Right.
I suppose he's saying he's appealing to the fact that if you look at this world, there's clearly no heaven. So come on now, let's not save yourself pain.
Yep.
Live in this world as it is now. So maybe it's that's the sort of flattery. It's like playing on the senses that we can't see anything. I've experienced everything. So come with me. Don't believe in such a stupid thing as a god.
Yes.
Let's go and live.
Yeah, well,
live
any worldview that exalts human wisdom and understanding is flattering because we can come to it through our own intelligence and our own research. And that's lovely because we can unlock the secrets to the world. We can dismiss the supernatural because we've done it. Look at what we've got. We've got the microscope. We've got the telescope. We can go to Jupiter. We can see everything. Like, look, we know everything. You know, and so there's no humility with that really, and it makes us feel good because we can understand everything. But these are saying no, we're walking a different. You know, we're living by faith. And so they leave Atheist behind, and the last they hear of him is just him cackling at them still, and he goes his way, and that's the end of it, really. And then they come into a certain country whose air naturally tended to make one drowsy if he came a stranger into it. So they're moving into this land now, which I don't know if it has enchanted ground. Yeah, okay, so... there's something in the air here,
magical.
Which, unless you've got your Christian armor wrapped tight around you, you're gonna fall under its bewitching spell, and it's gonna do you harm. And Hopeful begins to feel dull and heavy to sleep. Yeah. And then Christian, thankfully, he's got a mate with him, and
says, "Don't
Christian
sleep."
helps him out. Yeah.
And he says, "No, you're in danger. If you go to sleep, you may never wake up." And that's a great encouragement to Hopeful, isn't it? And he thanks him and says, "Oh, this is why two are better than one. This is why we need this is why we need Christian fellowship, isn't it? To keep each other going. Watch out, brother. Don't go to sleep." And then the way they don't go to sleep is to spark up a spiritual conversation, isn't it? And they go over a whole load of stuff, don't they? You know, how they were saved and all that sort of stuff again, which is just really good, isn't it? It's going over the basics and showing the reality that they of God in their lives and Christ's salvation, and just talking like that.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, Hopeful, he needs rescuing, doesn't he? As you say, because he argues that sleep is good. Yeah. He says, no, but it's sleep is sweet to the labouring man. We'll be refreshed if we take a nap, Yeah. Christian basically responds by saying, well, yes and no. I mean, there are times where we need to Sabbath and rest, but never to fall asleep, and especially not in a place like this, which we've already been warned about. And so that's
that's just good. I mean that happens in just life, doesn't it? You're driving along, you feel sleepy. What's the driver say? Talk to me. Let's if you put music on, it's a disaster. But it's let's get the brain going. Let's get the thinking going. Let's deal with something.
I used to have a mate who wouldn't allow anyone else to sleep while he was driving.
I think that's good.
And he would go, and if he saw you, he would just emergency stop like that, and then you would go.
I should do that with my wife. She's always asleep on the side. So I'm desperately trying to keep my eyes open.
But I mean, that's right. Good conversation keeps you going, and so that applies to the Christian, obviously.
So lots of conversation to keep them going. Going over their testimony, going over their convictions, and then there's a pause in that, and it says, I saw then in the dream that Hopeful looked back and saw Ignorance, whom they had left behind, coming after. And Hopeful says to Christian, look, here he is, he's he's behind us, and then they decide that instead of going on, they'll just wait for him and
see if he's learned his lessons.
And see where he's at, basically. And so how does that conversation get going then?
Well, I just love the way Bunyan says. So Ignorance says, I take my pleasure in walking alone, even more a great deal than in company. And I mean, that's just a picture of ignorance, isn't it? ignorance is a lone figure because he's not going to be instructed by anyone else. It's just a great, I'm alone. I think myself. I don't need any input. So starts off like that.
Yeah, which we've just learnt from the Enchanted Ground is exactly the opposite of what you need to do.
Yeah.
You need to have company. And so then they say to him, how stands it between God and your soul now? And, ignorance kind of picks up where he left off. He feels that he's doing fine. There are good thoughts that he's having and good emotions.
I think of God and heaven.
Yeah, he feels himself to be at peace with the Lord. And
there's a lovely to and froing. I think of God and heaven, says ignorance. So do the devils and damned souls. So there's a sort of punch up going on here.
Well, I love the answer to ignorance jotted his chin and held it higher. But I think of them and desire them.
Oh, yes. Then it goes on, I desire them. Yeah.
And then the response come back, well, that's not a sign of anything. The sluggard desires things but has nothing. So he would love a big bowl of steaming stew, but he can't be bothered to put the hand to the spoon to the mouth. So he won't labour to get what he desires, and so just wanting something is not a sign of anything.
Yeah, but he's left everything to obtain these.
Yeah, that's right.
To which Christian says, I doubt that very much.
Yeah, and then he says, what makes you so sure you've left everything? And he says, my heart tells me so.
Yeah.
And he
set himself up. Yeah, he set himself up.
That's just about the worst thing he could say. And Christian says, yes, that's the problem. You're trusting in your heart. That's a foolish thing to do.
And he hates that, doesn't he? He hates the idea. I mean, that's really where we're at, isn't it? It's the word of God against your heart, isn't it? And
his argument is that his heart isn't evil; it's actually a good heart.
Yes,
which is again warning signs.
Christian says, no, your heart is desperately wicked above all things.
Yeah.
So don't trust your heart.
Yeah.
And then
And then they have a long conversation.
It's like a modern conversation, this, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But it also turns into one of those conversations that you might sometimes have with Jehovah's Witnesses on the door or kind of Christian sects in the town. Because the thing about ignorance is he uses Christian language, but means different things by it. So he talks about being justified by Christ. And any Christian who hears that thinks, this is a brother or a sister, this is a partner. That's the language I use. I'm justified by Christ alone. But the wisdom of Christian and hopeful is to not just let the surface answers sit. They want to know not just what you've said, but what do you mean by what you said? Explain that to me. You use the word justification. Do we mean the same thing by it or not? And it's that line of questioning which shows up ignorance for what he is, because what he actually means is that he's justified by a combination of what Jesus has done and his own good works.
Yeah.
Now we know that good works are very important. In fact, they are an essential fruit of justification, but they are not the grounds of our justification. It's the merits of Christ, his atoning death, his perfect life. That is the grounds of our justification, and the good life follows. He seems to be muddled and think, well, it's sort of half that, but also half what God enables me to do.
Yeah.
So it's my good works and Christ's good works, and together they kind of work.
It's Catholic, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's why his belief about his heart is really important to understanding justification, because he thinks, if I have a good heart in some sense, that means I can please God in some sense. So he can't believe that his heart is completely and utterly wicked. So he doesn't understand sin.
It's sort of that Christ. It's sort of that Christ died for my failures.
Yeah,
and my sins, isn't it? The things that I've done. He's given me a good step up.
Yeah.
And now it's down to me, because my heart isn't that bad.
No.
Is to work out the good life.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think like this, and you have to push people, don't you? Sometimes,
Yeah.
And it is often the doctrine of sin, isn't it? That really shows people up that you are rotten to the core, that there is nothing good that you can do. Even your good works are flawed and like filthy rags in God's sight. People hate those sort of sayings, don't they? Oh, we all admit we're failures, and we all admit we're not, to be human is to fail. People say things like that, and as if that's okay. But actually, right to the core, there is nothing you can do, because every good work is tainted with that which is appalling to God. And he hates that, doesn't he? Ignorance.
They have different gods, basically. The gods that Christian and hopeful follow is more holy than ignorance actually understands. So I think it's interesting that those who follow such teachings, and basically religion, they think that they're being holier and that they're better and that their God's holier, but their God's lesser because he's a man-made God. And so the fall is really just a bit of naughtiness. I mean, it's probably a bit deep in that, but the heart isn't completely gone. No. So therefore, I can somehow work as you say, Christ gives me a boost up, but I'm also able to work my way to some sort of righteousness of my own. And it's just completely different because I think Christian talks about original sin. In other words, as soon as we fall, that's it. We're totally depraved.
Yes.
And there's nothing that we can do that can please God. And even if we try good things, those good things displease God.
Yeah.
It's an amazing thing that we must understand, that actually we are totally gone.
Yes.
Nothing that I can do. And so I need God to step in and to do all the work for me.
I remember once outside there was a big debate at the Albert Hall with a Christian and a Muslim debating, and I went up there to try to get in, but it was absolutely packed, and there was just loads of Muslims outside. And I was on my own walking around. They say, so a bunch came up to me, "Are you Christian?" And I said, "Yes." Then we have debate now outside. So I stood up on this wall and I made the mistake of saying, well, I used to take this line quite a lot, that Allah is not holy, not like the God of the Bible. He's an unholy God because he just lets sin off. Whereas the God of the Bible is the one that judges sin. He has to judge sin. And of course, if you say that Allah isn't holy, you get quite a lot of Allah Akbars going on around you. And this was all going on with these Allah Akbars. And then the policeman came over and accused me of causing, disruption. And wanted to arrest me. And then they Allah Akbar the policeman and said, "Let him speak. We want to debate." And so he just went off in the end. But anyway, but that is the difference between religion. It is really seeing that we are sinful before God, and that needs dealing with, and that's what justification is. We're made right by the work of Christ, not by our own work, and that's where ignorance just doesn't like it, really, does it?
No. And he then goes on to say, and this is something that Muslims do wonder, and it's a question that we've probably all had put to us, is they then say, well, if you're telling me that the life of Christ and the death of Christ are the sole basis of your justification, and that you are saved and made right entirely by what he's done, then how could that not lead to a life of open immorality? I mean, because it's all done for you, so why wouldn't you just go and live a life of indulgence and do whatever the heck you wanted, you know? And Muslims do say that. They do say that. So they say, so it doesn't matter what you do then. It doesn't matter what you do. And that's where there's a fundamental misunderstanding of the way in which grace operates in the heart. It's not just like a package that's left on your doorstep that you take. It's the sort of gift that is received with completely empty hands, but transforms your heart. And you're so... thankfulness is a huge part of New Testament teaching, that that we are overflowing with thankfulness, that we are abounding in thankfulness, and we want, therefore, to please the Saviour who has loved us so much, and so it's the sort of gift which moves the heart in the right direction, whereas ignorance thinks it's all transactional. It's something that you're just given, and then, okay, who cares? I'll just do whatever I want. But it's not that kind of gift.
But again, I think it probably conveys the fact that they have a different God and a different idea about sin. I think if you think about God as who he really is, and that we completely deserve the wrath, then that will spark gratitude, as you say, and it gives us a new heart. Whereas I think,
well, Paul deals with this in Romans, doesn't he? So Paul preaches so clearly that we are justified by faith in Christ alone. That the question comes up halfway through the book of Romans is, shall we carry on sinning then, so that grace may abound? And in one sense, I remember reading Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones. He's saying, you've not really preached the gospel until people are so offended that they make that point. Oh, so we can do anything we like then, can we? Because they've not really understood what we're saying until we really make it clear. It's nothing to do with you. It's all to do with Christ. And then that question comes out, and Paul says, by no means, of course, and all of the things that you just said. Yeah.
And then they come towards the end of the discussion, and Hopeful, I think it's Hopeful, asks him one last question, or gets Christian to ask him a question, which is, ask him if he had Christ revealed to him from heaven. And Ignorance says, what? You are a man of revelations? I do believe that what both you and all the rest of you say about this matter is but the fruit of distracted brains, Ignorance replied. And so he basically is saying, this is the key difference, isn't it? Christian and Hopeful believe that the way of salvation is not discernible to the natural mind, that it has to be revealed supernaturally to us from God, from heaven, and we need our eyes opened by the Spirit to get this. Ignorance basically believes that man can discover it within himself. He doesn't require any external revelation. And so he sort of thinks Christian and Hopeful are charismatic-y and mystical, because he says, I'm going to leave you to your whimsies and your distracted brains. You're talking like you need an experience of God to understand this or something, whereas I'm saying this is, that I've got a self-revelation here.
It's interesting, actually, because in the end, Ignorance is basically an atheist. He's just an atheist going another way. And they are the same. It's one of the things. So in John Blanchard's book, Does God Believe in Atheists? One of the big things he goes, and it caused quite a lot of fuss when he wrote it, was that all religions are basically atheists, because they're not listening to God, they're listening to a false God, so they have to be atheists. So that's his thing. So he would call Islam an atheistic religion, which obviously doesn't go down very well.
No,
because they're not listening to the God, because there is only one God and His revelation, and He is. They are the same, aren't they? Really, they're just going different ways. They're basically believing in themselves, aren't they?
Yeah.
All are forms of self-righteousness.
Yeah.
All are forms of trying to decide what's right and wrong.
Yeah. So the atheist is a religious person in the sense that the ignorance is a religious person.
Exactly, yeah.
Good stuff. Yeah, well, they part ways with Ignorance for now. I think this isn't the final time that we see Ignorance in the book. But, it's interesting that Bunyan spills so much ink on Ignorance, isn't it? Because some of the apostates and stuff only get a line or two, but he's been given a fair chunk of this book, and I wonder if that's saying that, the Lord is very patient sometimes with people, isn't he? And he gives people time after time after time after time, and he puts people in our lives to explain things to us and to help us, but ultimately, if we're so set on our own ways, then we'll be left to them, and so there's a warning there, isn't it? Not to sort of despise the patience of the Lord and the knowledge that we're given. All right, there we go. So that's Flatterer, Atheist, Enchanted Ground, Ignorance. That was the close of that chapter, and the next chapter is entitled The Celestial City. So
are we going to get there in the next chapter?
Unlikely, I think. But Do keep joining. We'll have a couple more of these, and I hope you've been enjoying them. If you've liked them and found them useful, do recommend them, share them, tell your friends about them, and do write to us if there's anything that you'd like us to deal with or to answer. But until next time, we'll see you then.